Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to our afternoon activity period, sponsored by Private Industry Council's after-school program. And as you know, since everybody's out, we're still out and the schools are all still out, we wanted to provide some activities for you during the week so you can just have some fun and come out of boredom a little bit and just take a little breather from schoolwork. So let me ask you, I hope everybody's doing good. I hope you're still practicing your safety practices, like for instance, washing your hands, and if you're going out, covering your face with a mask. We know that is extremely, extremely important. And so in trying to get a little exercise in there, if you go outside, I hope that you're doing those things to help keep you healthy, and I hope that you're eating the right foods and drinking plenty of fluids, which today is sort of what we're going to talk about today. First, let me ask you, happen to see our first video? If you haven't, go onto the webpage of Private Industry Council and you will be able to see our videos. We have a lot of fun doing them and you'll get to see me, and I want you to write back and let me know in the comments that you're having fun, that you did well with your project, and you might have some ideas of some things that you'd like to see us do. So feel free to write us back. Okay, so today we are going to do the best weather science experience created by Mrs. Jones Creation Station. And I thought this was just tremendous. So I said, I think the kids would like this because it has everything to do with our everyday life, with our everyday existence. It has everything to do with water. Yes, we may not think about it, but we do think about it if we're out somewhere and it's hot or it's cold or whatever, and we get pretty thirsty and we think, if I just had some water. So we want to talk about water today. And we know that, when you go into the grocery store with your parents or wherever, you can go buy a bottle of water. So we don't always think about where water comes from, but let me think how I want to say this. I don't want to necessarily say exciting, but the most important thing to remember is that water comes from our what?
It's so good to have a nice cool drink of water after that epic soccer game we just had. Hey Squeaks, do you know where this water came from? Yeah, it did come from the sink. We're pretty lucky here at the fort. All we have to do is turn on the faucet and water comes right out. But what about before that? How did it get to the faucet? You might know that things like sinks and bathtubs are connected to pipes that carry water all through your house and school. But before it even gets to those pipes, water has to come from a source, a place where there's lots of water gathered in one place. Can you think of somewhere where there might be a lot of water? That's right, the ocean, but it's too salty for people to drink. Instead, some cities and towns get their water from sources like lakes and rivers. They clean the water to get rid of any germs or chemicals that could be unhealthy, and then they send it through pipes to everyone who lives nearby. In other places, including here at the fort, people get their water from a well in the ground. A well is a hole that reaches down deep into the earth. Once it reaches deep enough, the well hits water. Good question, Squeaks. The water gets into the ground when it rains. The rain sinks down through the soil, going between the pieces of dirt until it hits solid rock that it can't go through. That's when the water stops and sits in the spaces between the dirt. We call this groundwater. And even though it might sound a little bit like an underground lake, that's not really what it is. It's not like there's a big empty space filled with just water. The groundwater is inside the dirt, kind of like a giant area made of mud. But even though it's surrounded by dirt, groundwater is pretty clean. Anything that isn't supposed to be in the water will stick to the dirt, leaving the water nice and clean. It's this clean water that wells try to reach. To build a well, you dig a long tube into the ground until it reaches the level where the water has settled underground. That's called the water table. The well goes below the water table to where the soil is filled with groundwater. Then something amazing happens. The well starts to fill with water. Just water, no dirt. Yeah, it's pretty incredible, Squeaks. And the most amazing part is that the water is moving all on its own. Groundwater is trapped between hard rock and very heavy soil, which means it's being squeezed pretty hard, kind of like when you squeeze a wet sponge with your hands. And when you dig a well, suddenly there's an empty space where the water can go. It's like the heavy dirt is squeezing the water into the well. Once the water is in the well, we can use pipes to pull it out. Some towns and cities have a whole bunch of wells that they use to pull lots of water out of the ground at once. Then they send the water to people who need it through the pipes, instead of everybody having their own well. But people who don't live close to big towns usually have their own personal wells for their houses, since it's easier than building pipes to bring water from very far away. And that's what we have at the fort. Would you like some of this water, Squeaks? Here you go. I've never met a robot who loved water as much as you. Thanks for joining us. If you want to keep learning and having fun with Squeaks and me, hit the subscribe button and we'll see you next time here at the fort.
Rain. So rain is very important. How about on those days when it rains and rains and rains, and we're so tired of it, we just want sunshine. We just want the warmth. We want to go to the beach, or we want to do, of course we can't do too much of that now, but we want to just go out and do those fun things. And it's raining and raining and raining. But know something, children, rain is extremely important. If we did not have rain, which produces the water that comes to us, if we didn't have it, we couldn't live. So we have to learn to even appreciate water. And let me say this, when you're at home, and you're at home with your parents, because if you're young, you may not understand this, but when you get older, and you get your own apartment, or you get married and get your own house, you're going to find out that you have to pay for water, because water just, we don't collect it. You can, but we don't just collect it coming out of the sky. It gets processed. But before all of that, before all of the processing, and the processing is important because it takes out all of the impurities in our water. But before all of that, remember, you have to have rain, okay? Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about water. Let's start with that. Why do we need water?
I love swimming, but feeling water in the skin is the best.
Did you know that more than half our bodies are made of water? About 60%.
Yeah, that's why we need to drink plenty of water every day.
As well as getting 60 minutes of activity and plenty of rest.
Come on, all this talk of water is making me thirsty.
Water is really important for the healthy function of every single cell and organ in our bodies. For us kids, it's especially important we get all the water we need.
That's because we do a lot of learning.
Our brains contain more than 75% water, and we need to keep that level topped up in order to keep our brains functioning properly.
We lose water from our bodies when we sweat, go to the toilet, and just by breathing.
Which means that you're losing water through your lungs, even as you sleep.
So it's a good idea to have a glass by your bed, and definitely with breakfast.
Yeah, to hydrate your body and give you a great start to the day. Look at this. I'm filling the glass to about 60% full. That's how much water's in your body.
And this is how much water's in your brain. About 75%.
Although we get some water from our food,
the best way to put water back into our body is by You guessed it,
Drinking water.
Cheers!
So why do we need water? Well, one of the things is to quench our thirst. But to get really into the other very important reason for needing water, it is to live. And let me read this to you. Our bodies uses water whenever we drink a glass of water. It goes into our cells and into all of our organs and into our tissues. It helps bind and hold these things together, okay, in order to maintain all of our bodily functions. Like, for instance, when we get thirsty, that's something that happens. You feel it in your mouth, you feel it in your throat. You need water to lubricate. We need water to help cool down, keep our body temperature at 98.6 or 98.7. One of the important things that we are taught, that whenever you have a fever, how many people have had a fever? Yeah, how do you feel? You feel yucky, right? You feel really sick. You feel really, really hot. You may have a sore throat, and your mom or dad will say, do you want a glass of water? And even though you're sick, you drink that cool water, and it just cools you down. And how many times do you want a glass of cold water or a cold drink? What do? You go get some ice. And ice is another form of water. That's so important to understand. So it is necessary for our bodily functions to work smoothly. Now, why is it that we always have to drink? I know we always get thirsty because that's really natural. But we lose water. We actually lose water. Guess how? Through our breathing. Let's do a little experiment. Breathe in and out through your mouth. Pull the air in. What happens? Yeah, your throat gets really dry. So you need a glass of what? Water to lubricate it. So we lose it through our breathing. We lose it through our sweating, exercising, running, playing with our buddies. And what happens? Even if it's in the winter in the house, you're playing, what happens? Whoa, I'm hot. Oh man, I need some water. Stop for a minute, let's get some water. So we lose it through sweating and digesting. You can eat, how many know you can eat a bunch of food? You can eat and you feel like, oh, it's stuck in my throat. So you need a glass of what? Water or liquid. And liquid is always made of water. So you drink that and it helps your digestion system. And we know that when we go to the bathroom, we expel water. All of those things are natural functions. So that's the importance of drinking plenty of water, plenty of fluids. Not so much always sugar, because sugar, a lot of sugar is not good for us, even though we like it. But drinking a lot of water and eating foods that contain water. What foods do you think contain water? Think about that. A lot of foods, fruit, apples, juice. Most of your fruit and juice, the juice, the fluid, contain water. So that's very important to understand. So why don't we go on, and we're going to talk about rain. Because rain is that's the other name for water, but it is the name of the fluid. We call it water, but it is rain, which is water that comes out of the sky. It is rain, and that is our water. Okay, so understand that the earth is limited. The earth has a limited amount of water. So what happens is, to keep things flowing properly, the water keeps going around and around, and it's called a water cycle. It is the cycle of water. We see it in our streams, we see it in our lakes, we see it, it's called the cycle of water. So let's talk about that cycle of water. So think about this now. When the sun heats the water in the lakes, how many of you have been to a lake? Yeah, they're beautiful. And you see a embodiment of water, okay? Streams, how many of you have seen streams? And streams are constantly flowing. Oceans are huge. What do we see in oceans? Whales and sharks and all kind of fish, lobster, crabs, all of those live in the water. And all of those things are replenished by rain, okay? And so when you see all of those other water sources, okay, some of it turns to a gas, which is called water vapor. It is a water vapor, and it's so thin, you can't really see it. Probably has to be like a moment of where it's real bright and it looks kind of steamy sometimes. That means that the water's evaporation. And the proper name for that is evaporation. Yes, that's the first step. I'm going to leave this here. Evaporation. And so I want to ask you a little question. Where do you think evaporation goes? What happens to it? That's right. Since it's water vapor, it rises into the air. And it doesn't just go away, okay? It ends up in the atmosphere. Yes, okay. So, when the water vapor hits the cold air, because understand, as the water goes up, we may be hot down here, but higher it's colder. Perfect example. If you've ever gone on vacation or even lived in a place where there are mountains. Years ago, my husband and my 2 children and I lived in Fort Collins, Colorado. And in Fort Collins, Colorado, it is the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. And in the summertime, the temperature was so hot. It may be 100 degrees, and it was hot and it was dry. And we would drive up into the mountains. And the higher that you would go up into the mountains, the cooler it would become. That's why even at places like Mount Everest, I've never been there, you see the snow cap on the mountains all year round because the elevation is extremely high. Okay, so when the water vapors, these little droplets hit the cold air high up in the atmosphere, because the atmosphere is above us, it turns back to water droplets and it collects in the clouds. Where are the clouds? Up. And there are different types of clouds. But the water ends up there, and that is called condensation, okay? It's when the droplets collect in the cloud, and this is our process of rain for our water. So then when there are too many droplets forming in a cloud, the cloud gets really heavy. And the water falls back into the earth in the form of what? Yes, rain. This is how we get our rain. Not only does it come in rain, it also comes in hail. What do you think hail is?
Weather School. May I introduce myself first? Hail is a special type of rain. You don't see me very often, since a hailstone only forms in large thunderclouds. Thunderclouds mostly form during summer. That's the time when the rays of the sun are especially strong and make many water particles rise into the sky. They create huge clouds with lots of water drops. The wind is blowing very hard in these clouds, and the drops are blown very far up. High up in the cloud, the air is very cold, and the water drops there freeze into ice. That makes them heavier, and so they start sinking again. Farther down, the ice grains hit the water drops there. They stick to the ice grains and make them grow a bit more. Once the ice grains reach the bottom of the cloud, the wind blows them back up. More water drops stick to them. This keeps on happening until the clumps of ice grow too heavy to float and fall to the ground. That's what we call hail. Some hailstones can even reach the size of a soccer ball.
Precipitation. You ever listen to the weatherman, and the thing that they say is our precipitation for this day, and it's a long word, but it's one, and it's important for you to know, okay? So then we have precipitation. And then lastly, so whenever the water falls back into the earth, it'll fall back into the streams, it falls into the lakes, it falls into the oceans, it falls into the stream, it falls all over the land. How many know when it's collected, we call it what? Puddles. How fun is it to jump in puddles? How many of you have jumped in puddles, especially on a hot day and it has rained? I tell you something, that's the best day that you can see some condensation, because it's all steamy and it's warm and it's humid. That's condensation. If you've ever been to Florida, how many have been to Disney, pardon me, or to Florida? You will see the condensation. It is steamy after it rains. It's wonderful. It's our part of summer. It's great. Okay, so when it falls back to the land, now listen at this, because there are days when it rains and rains and rains. Do you remember the days? Some days it would rain, and especially I think last summer, we haven't gotten to summer yet. It rained so many days, and it rained so much that the earth could not hold all the rain. And consequently what happened, maybe, and ask your parents about this if you didn't hear about it, trees were falling over. My daughter has a tree that fell over from too much rain, okay? The ground is saturated, and it lifts, especially if it's a younger tree, and a lot of older trees too. It lifts the roots up out of the soil when it's raining days and days, and you can walk with an umbrella and your raincoat on and boots, and you'll walk and you can sink down into the mud because it's a lot of water, okay? And it's called runoff, and it just runs over the soil, and then for some miraculous reason, it ends up back into the oceans and streams and lakes and all those things. It's just it's miraculous. So this is the cycle of water. And guess what? It begins all over again. Yeah. How many know what I'm talking about? How many have been to a place or even seen on TV where places have flooded? Yeah. That's why, because a lot of rain has fallen. And how about hurricanes? Have you seen hurricanes? What comes with it? High winds and what? A lot of rain. tornadoes. Now, even with tornadoes, it may not rain within the tornado, but before the tornado comes, sometimes they experience rain. So rain is so significant. It is used in so many ways. It's incorporated in different systems in our world, but it is absolutely necessary. It can be dangerous because water is a force that can be contained somewhat. We have dams. What's in your dams? Water. But even that has to be controlled. It is necessary that when even you're going in and you're playing in the swimming pool, that there's a lifeguard or you're with a parent or someone, because water, what can happen? You can drown in water. But if you know how to swim, if you stay in the shorter end of the pool, like I do, because I can't swim, let me ask you, how many of you can swim? How many of you are afraid of water? How many of you have ever gone on a cruise? I haven't yet. Why don't you comment me back and let me know. Something about a cruise. What happens on a cruise? There's a huge, enormous cruise line. They call it a cruise line. It's a ship. It has different levels, and people live on there. They have all kind of games. They eat on there. But to go to show you the power that water holds, these enormous cruise ships literally float on this water, and they have to have a captain and different, I don't know what you call them, sailors, but you have to have a crew who helps run the ship so that the ship can run smoothly, especially in a storm. And we know that in a storm, here comes water, okay? So I hope you enjoyed our little talk, and I'd like to hear about if you have some ideas or you gained some thoughts about that. Again, write it in the comments. So what we're going to do a weather experiment to see how water falls from the sky. And this is kind of fun, okay? So I got a big one here. I got a big vase of water. And what you're going to need for your tools, and I kind of want you to keep seeing these so you'll know the process, okay? I hope you can see those. So our supplies today, we're going to use, and I got, again, this from the dollar store. It was only $1, and it's enough to make your experiment, and you can kind of make this over and over. I'm still using, if you remember, the food color that I got from the dollar store. And today, we're going to use blue because blue kind of represents water. There's blue water when you go in the ocean and that. So we're going to use blue. Okay. And I have a dropper, okay, that we're going to use. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to shake. You can do this and make sure, remember, you have someone around that's older than you. I don't want you to do your experiments by yourself, okay? That's kind of fun. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to shake the can, and then you have someone, unless you're old enough to do it, to take the lid off and place the lid aside. You don't want to lose it. And the reason why I have white paper here, because this keeps you from losing things, okay? Okay. So what we're going to do, well, I think it's important to do this first. I'm going to put some drops of water, of color, in this cup, because we want it to be nice and blue. And you're going to stir it real good. You really kind of want it to be a little darker. I'm going to see if I can get this a little darker. And you can kind of measure how many drops? Probably anywhere between 4 and 6. It drops, and make sure you have some paper down, because you don't, let me see, you don't want to soil. I think I'm going to just go for a few more drops. Okay. Stir it up again. Okay. So we're going to take our shaving cream. Now, make sure you hold your jar. And it's important to have more water, just probably about an inch of water from the top, okay? And you can use a small container like this, a clear glass, if you're little. If you're like not kindergarten, but kindergarten, first grade, maybe second, use a little larger container, and you want it clear so that you can see. So what you're going to do, this is the fun part. Because you want to produce some clouds in there, okay? So you're going to kind of fill that up. These represent the clouds. And the reason why we have the water here, the clear jug, so you can see you'll be able to see how the rain falls. And this is the process of the rain falling. Now, when you see the clouds, you know that condensation has happened, okay? Evaporation, here it is, has started, okay? Because the sun shines down, okay, on the lakes and the streams, and the water has begun to evaporate, okay? And as it goes up, it hits the cool part of the atmosphere, which is called condensation, okay? And so you see it goes up. Here's the clouds, okay? Up into the clouds, okay? And then now you've got too many droplets formed in a cloud, and the cloud is heavy, okay? So this is what it starts doing. And I'm going to hope I did this correctly. What happens is it starts to what? It starts to rain. Now, it should have been a stream. I think I pushed it too heavy. But what happens, what I want you to see is the water as you saw it come down. And what happens, the blue part means that it's adding, it adds to your oceans. And it adds to your seas, your oceans, the lakes. I'm going to try one more time. I really kind of wanted a squirt. You're supposed to kind of do it with a straw, but I couldn't find a straw. Okay. So that's kind of our experiment. Water comes down, and it begins to fill, and it begins to add to what's already there. It comes out of the clouds, okay? Now, we couldn't get it to rain in this experience, like drop, drop, drop. But you could see where it feels, and it's still going down. It's still coming down, okay? And watch it for a little while, and it gives you an idea of rain. It gives you an idea, which is called collection, okay, of how our water's collected. And if you have ever walked at a park, I used to walk at a park, and I walked around what's called a reservoir. And the name of the park was Highland Park in Pittsburgh. Love that park. And I would walk around the reservoir, and I would see when it would rain, they would sort of have a measurement around this huge building, around this huge structure that looked like a huge swimming pool. And sometimes the men, they periodically would go in, their maintenance workers, and sit in a boat, and they would put chlorine in it. But what's interesting, when it rained, the rain would fill up. It would fill up. It would fill up. It would fill up. And this is what's happening here. You see, it's still small, falling. It's still coming down, and it's still adding. So that was our experiment for today. I hope you enjoyed it. And I want to know if you've done this experiment, or if you've even done it better than I did, or if you added something. Let me know. Remember something. Rain is so important. It is the entire source of our water. And if it wasn't for this beautiful, miraculous miracle of rain, of evaporation, condensation, precipitation, and collection, we wouldn't have any water. So remember, value your water, okay? Thank you so much, kids. I want to hear from you. I want to hear how you're doing. Remember, keep practicing safety. What are we going to do? Wash our hands. We're going to clean up. I'm going to be obedient to our parents. Thank you, kids. Have a great day, and see you next week.